Welcome to Issues That Matter. My guest today is Alan Collinge. Alan and I have talked many times over the past couple of years, but I would like Alan to give an overview of how he got started with student loan justice and what motivated him to do what he does. So, Alan, you went to college, you incurred some debt. You have 2 degrees, right?
I actually have 3 degrees.
Well, oh, good for you. So then, when you get out of college, you must have found yourself in debt, right?
Yeah, I got 3 degrees in aerospace engineering from the University of Southern California. I borrowed rather moderately, actually. I wound up borrowing a grand total of somewhere around $35,000 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I graduated, spent a few years at the California Institute of Technology as an associate scientist, actually almost nearly 3 years. But right around 2011, I found myself, I left my job at Caltech. I found myself unemployed, underemployed for a time. And I tried to work with my lender at the time, who was Sally Mae, to keep my loans in forbearance. But rather than granting me a forbearance, they just shunted my loans into default. And very quickly, right off the top, there was a 25% surcharge. And within a little while, a few months even, I was being billed for over $80,000, demanding payment in full. And so within a few years, my balance had grown to over $100,000. And this is despite my best efforts to keep my loans in good stead. So I smelled a rat, Cynthia. I've borrowed money in the past and never seen anything like this,
Mm-hmm.
particularly on the scale that it was happening to me. And thankfully, I was able to find a job in the finance industry. Interestingly, I was regional director for a federal government loan program through the Department of Transportation. And so I became quite financially savvy about lending and borrowing, and from the lender's side of the ledger. I
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot about good faith and really what it takes to have a successful loan contract, etc. And it just became overwhelmingly obvious to me that something horribly wrong had happened with the federal student loan system. So I started researching the lending program itself around 2005 or so, 2004. And what I found was jaw dropping. The collusion between the lenders and the colleges and even the Department of Education was just monstrous. The amount of money that the lending industry had plowed into key congressional candidates, their family members, and other places was just astonishing to me. And so I took my research to Fortune magazine, a really good reporter there, Bethany McLean, the reporter who broke the Enron story, by the way. She had written a piece about Fannie Mae, the home mortgage company at the time, and I sent her an email saying, Bethany, if you think Fannie Mae is bad, you should look at Sally Mae. And lo and behold, about a year later, after sending her all my research and badgering her and bothering her, pestering her, Bethany wound up doing a really good feature story on Sally Mae. And this very quickly led to a top story interview with 60 Minutes back in May 2006. These were two very powerful stories. And in fact, the 60 Minutes story led to investigations across the country that uncovered probably what culminated in the largest scandal in the history of higher education in this country, where illegal kickbacks and bribes were discovered between the financial aid administrators from some very affluent colleges like the University of Southern California, my alma mater, Columbia University, Texas A&M, University of Texas, UT Austin, other colleges where the financial aid administrators were fired. And this all culminated in Ted Kennedy's final piece of higher education legislation, which was called the Student Borrower Sunshine Act. So I got off to a pretty strong start being an accidental advocate, or accidental activist, I should say, in the student loan area. It turns out I was the first student loan activist in the country. So there's that.
So I have two questions.
Yeah.
My first question is when you took out your loans and you were in college, did you realize that the problem that you were facing was so enormous?
Oh, like all of the kids up to and including today, by and large, I had no clue, Cynthia. I
Okay.
thought these loans were friendly, government loans that were, reasonable and moderate and easy to repay and had all sorts of, safety safeguards behind them. In fact, the opposite is true. Federal student loans, certainly, and even private student loans have been weaponized, and I mean weaponized like no other loan in this country, against the borrowers. Every loan out there has bankruptcy protections, has statutes of limitations, has fair debt collection laws, truth in lending laws. None of those things exist for certainly federal student loans, but even private student loans have been stripped of bankruptcy protections. So bankruptcy and statutes of limitations are the two most important protections that have been removed.
So when you were on 60 Minutes, that was a number of years ago. Is that on YouTube?
Yeah, it's around. Yeah, you can find it.
Okay.
And interestingly, that 60 Minutes piece was also Senator Elizabeth Warren's very first splash in the national spotlight. She was teaching bankruptcy law at Harvard University at the time. And so it's pretty interesting that now she is supposedly a leading congressional Senate fighter in the Senate for student loan justice. And maybe we can talk about that a little more later. I've been quite disappointed in Senator Warren, to be quite honest with you.
So you found yourself in a little bit of hot water, with your loans. At that point, what were you thinking and what did you do?
Well, it was astonishing to me that this so-called, this friendly, safe, government-sponsored, friendly lending instrument could blow up on me to where $35,000 in loans could blow up to over $100,000 in really the blink of an eye. What I decided to do was fight and get to the bottom of how this could have happened to me. And if it's happening to me, how many other people must it be happening to? And, even way back in 2006, the numbers were just nightmarish. We owed cumulatively around $450 billion in 2006, which at the time was a lot of money. But I found that the Department of Education was being very insincere, in fact, misleading about how they reported their true default rate. In fact, they didn't report their true default rate. They only reported something called the cohort default rate, which only counts defaults that happen in the first year or two after graduation. And so the scale of this problem was being massively swept under the rug and hidden from view. And, I can only say, Cynthia, it's so sad that I'm here 17 years later. And the first thing that I started fighting for, and the one thing that remains at the core of this problem today, the return of bankruptcy protections to student loans. So sad that bankruptcy remains gone from these loans. They were taken away from federal loans in fait accompli in 1998. They were taken away from private student loans, thanks Joe Biden, in 2005. And even here, 17 years later, while now, by all rational metrics, the entire federal student loan program is now, it's vanishing into a mist of illegitimacy. It's collapsing. Quite frankly, I think it's a dead man walking at this point. I think the pandemic was the nail in the coffin. But even still, here today, while we're talking, the fundamental constitutionally enshrined right of bankruptcy remains gone from these loans. It is the greatest economic injustice in our nation's history. And I don't say that lightly.
Okay, so you found yourself heavily in debt, and you thought, well, I'm probably not the only person who's heavily in debt. At that point, what did you do?
Well, like I said, I started doing a lot of research. I started trying to figure out what happened. How had these loans become weaponized against the citizens? And so I took my research first to Fortune magazine, then to 60 Minutes. And then in 2009, I wrote a book called The Student Loan Scam. Maybe
You
I
have
can,
it?
I do have it right here. The Student Loan Scam with Beacon Press.
Okay, great.
Turned out to be a very prescient book. The book is far more relevant today than it was the day that I wrote it. With Beacon Press out of Boston. And over the years, we had very good relationships with some key senators like Hillary Clinton, Dick Durbin, and here, and then Elizabeth Warren after that. Been quite disappointed in both parties, quite frankly, both the Democrats and Republicans. They have collectively failed to at least return bankruptcy to these loans. And even here today, as I said, bankruptcy remains gone. And even Elizabeth Warren is being very coy, very non-committal about her stated goal of returning constitutional bankruptcy protections to student loans. Right now, the whole zeitgeist is full of talk about loan cancellation, which I'm very glad it is, by the way. It was our group that initially launched the concept of canceling student loans by executive order into the public conversation. So we did a seminal interview with Vice News in August 2019. It's the first news coverage of the concept of canceling loans by executive order. And then we started the petition that now has over 1 million signatures. But in March 2020, when COVID hit, we launched the petition that really gave the concept a lot of legs. And thankfully, to her credit, Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer, right around the time our petition was just absolutely exploding in the media, Fox News, Newsweek, elsewhere, Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer embraced the concept and began calling on then President Trump to cancel loans by executive order. And we're glad that they did that. Very not glad that they put an up to $50,000 cap on the cancellation, which is quite frankly a trick. It's a Washington, D.C. trick, and I can talk about that a little later if you want me to. But Elizabeth Warren, for example, is being quite coy on the bankruptcy issue. Now, we've got a great bill in the Senate right now, S-2598. It would not only return bankruptcy protections to federal student loans, it would also require the colleges to reimburse the government. Not a huge amount. It's a sliding scale based on the repayment and default rates of the colleges, but it's up to 50% of the original amount borrowed. It won't be nearly that much for most schools, of course, but it's not inconsequential.
So when did you decide to create student loan justice? Because it's a nationwide organization and you have branches in every state. What made you decide to do that?
Well, this was right around the time that I was pestering Bethany McLean at Fortune magazine in 2005. I just realized that the scope of this problem was so huge and absolutely nobody was talking about it, that somebody had to do something. So I was sort of creating websites as a sort of a side hustle at the time. And so I decided to go ahead and take out studentloanjustice.org as a website in March 2005. So our group has been around for a long time.
Uh-huh.
For the first few years, it was, very small. When we got featured on 60 Minutes, May 2006, it grew pretty significantly. Um, and then at one point, I became so impassioned about this issue because literally nobody was telling the truth about this problem.
Mhm.
I decided to leave my job, or actually I was laid off now that I come to remember it. I was laid off from my job. So I sold my house. I bought an RV and I traveled the country in 2007. So my belief at that time was that the good guys in Congress were going to solve this problem. I thought, okay, well, by the end of the year, they should have at least bankruptcy protections returned to the loans. But I was so naive, Cynthia. I had no idea at how powerful and strong this predatory lending system was in Washington, D.C. So 2007 came and went. I traveled the country, got home, and I began to really start understanding the seedy, dark, strong side of this nationally threatening lending beast. It really is a beast, Cynthia.
Mhm.
Um, and so here we are, flash forward for 17, 15, 16 years now.
Mhm.
We're very close. We're very close. We've got Dick Durbin has got a great bill in the Senate. He's head of the Judiciary Committee. He's or Senate Majority Whip. We've got 2 Republican senators on the bill that we're fighting for, S-2598. So we're getting really close to finally solving this problem. And it could not come sooner, I can tell you.
Well, if bankruptcy is returned, but there's a whole history from the beginning up until now with loans and people who have lost, a job and couldn't pay back. And, there's one issue that I talked about yesterday with a friend was adjunct professors and how many adjunct professors uh, teach at colleges is a really staggering number. And I would say not a majority, but a substantial amount must have student loan debt. And if they're paid poverty wages and they have PhDs, that's not good.
No, it's not. Adjuncts, professors live in a very special circle of hell on the student loan issue. Here, they spent all this time and effort educating themselves. Now, here they serve they work in academia, who, these colleges are just making massive amounts of revenue from the student loan program, and yet they are paid essentially poverty, like Walmart type wages. I kid you not. They're making just very little money at all. And so while our group, we don't focus specifically on adjuncts because, there's 45 million people in the country with student loans.
Mm-hmm.
40 million of them were never going to be able to repay their loans. And that's true today. So there's 40 of 80% of all student loan borrowers are financially distressed at this point. But yeah, adjuncts feel it particularly terribly. And I might add, a lot of people love to say, oh, well, there's these public service loan forgiveness programs out there where if you
Mm-hmm.
teach or work for a nonprofit, you get your loans forgiven. That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
The programs exist, that is true. But all of the forgiveness programs that we've seen that exist today and that have existed since 1995, Cynthia, they have been administered in the worst of bad faith, where the disqualification rate for all these programs cumulatively is over 99%. And public service is no exception. They were disqualifying 99% of their people until very recently. We've seen a few more people get their loans canceled through public service in recent over the past year or so. But I'm here to tell you that as long as bankruptcy remains gone from these loans, as long as the Department of Education is what it is, and that is a very corrupted and captured lending beast, they will have no desire or intentions of canceling any loans, and they will continue to administer any loan forgiveness program put to them in the worst of bad faith. They cannot be trusted. That's why the people need the threat of bankruptcy back on their side. I
Oh,
keep coming back to bankruptcy, and I know
right,
a lot of people don't
right.
want to file, but I'm just telling you, the founding fathers called for uniform bankruptcy laws in the Constitution and had the power to declare
So
war.
you say there's 46 million Americans with student loans, right? That 46.
Yeah, there's actually more. If you include private loans and cosigners, it's up to somewhere around 56 or 7 million people. And
Okay.
about 80% of them were underwater on their loans even before the pandemic.
So if there's, let's say, 55 million, how many people have signed on to student loan justice?
We should have at least 35 million people, frankly, but um, we've got over a million people. So we've got 1.1 million people, more than that, on our petition. We've got, hundreds of thousands of people across all of our other platforms,
Mhm,
Facebook, YouTube,
mhm.
etc. Um, so we've got a fairly good number of people. We've got a huge muscle to flex, but frankly, we should have way more, because right now, probably 40 plus million people are losing sleep every night about their student loans. And we are really the only group that I can point to that is actually um, fighting for the true solution to this problem. This up to $50,000 loan cancellation is nonsense. As long as bankruptcy remains gone from the loans,
Mhm.
President Biden is not going to cancel anything meaningful. Up to $50,000 could mean anything. And as long as bankruptcy is gone, they're going to do what they've always done, which means we said up to 50,000, and that could mean anything. What it means for you is 3 grand. It means 8 grand for you. It means nothing for you because you earn too much. It means nothing for you because you didn't fill out your forms right. That's the way that's going to go. So we've got to get the threat of bankruptcy back on our side first in order to see actual, not fake, student loan cancellation. And we're the only group in the country that's fighting for that. It's really sad to me that the other student loan advocacy groups don't recognize this obvious fact.
What do you think it's going to take for Joe Biden to start shaking in his boots?
I think with the threat of bankruptcy returned, that is the fire that Joe Biden needs to feel under his ass, pardon my French, to actually meaningfully, broadly cancel student loans. In the current political dynamics, he could call a press conference tomorrow, say, "Oh, I'm going to do everything Elizabeth Warren wants. I'm going to cancel up to $50,000," and the band will cheer, and the parade, and the champagne, all that stuff, confetti. And at the end of the day, it's going to be what I said. It's nonsense. However, with the threat, the leverage of bankruptcy returned to these loans as it exists for every other type of loan in the country, then and only then, I think, will we see Joe Biden cancel a meaningful amount of the student debt. Quite frankly, he should cancel all of it. This lending system has failed like no other lending system has ever failed in our country. The default rate for subprime home mortgages was 20%. The default rate for student loans, it was 40% in 2004, but those people were only borrowing a third of what's being borrowed today. So the federal student loan program has gone so far off the rails. It is without precedent, and it's without any kind of comparison.
So you and I have been talking for a number of years, and in the course of our conversations, I came across a filmmaker in Albany who I thought might be helpful in getting your message out. And unfortunately, there was a conflict of personalities, and it didn't quite go as we had anticipated it to go. So what I want to do with these videos that I put on YouTube is a recreation of the film that we had hoped would make it, to the general public, which it really hasn't. So my goal is to inform people and to recreate the movie so that more people can understand exactly what's going on. So my I urge people who are watching this on YouTube to subscribe to the channel so you can get updates. And Alan, you and I will be talking to other people, and I hope that we could inform many more people so that this problem can be solved and it could be a burden off of everybody's shoulders. So, in the final minute, give your contact information and how they can join Student Loan Justice.
Sure. Yeah, we're everywhere. Probably the best place to start is just go to our website, studentloanjustice.org. And just remember, we are a working, fighting group. We're not a watch it happen movement. We're a make it happen endeavor. But anyway, can go to studentloanjustice.org. They can Google us. They can see all the research that we've done, all the great news coverage we've gotten recently. But more than anything, they can participate because we need them in this fight. This is as grassroots gets. And so I'm just thrilled to be working with you on this, Cynthia. And it'll be an interesting journey to take people through the years and arm them with enough information so that they can become very powerful student loan justice warriors.
Thank you, Alan. We will talk again. So, you've been listening to Alan Collinge, this head of Student Loan Justice. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you know anybody else who is burdened with student debt, pass it on to them so that they could subscribe also. Alan, it was great talking to you today. We'll talk again. Thank you, and thank you everybody for listening. Have a great day.